Hey, what's up, Fiery 49 fam? Welcome back. Another episode. Finally, we're getting some content. We're getting to work on the truck. Just a quick recap of where we've been. Lots of not working between COVID restrictions, virtual learning with kids, holidays, lots going on. We've only had a couple days to actually work on the truck. With all that sitting, after we had the truck running, a lot driving, we hit the road one time, a few things, starting to stretch the legs on Fiery 49, and then we had to park it for a while. But we parked it with some fuel in the tank so it could be moved around here at the Vintage Fire Museum Annex, and it developed a leak. We'd had the tank out, looked inside, the tank was dry previously. Some rust didn't look bad. We put fuel in it, held for several weeks, no issues, but eventually over that time period of just sitting in here, the solvents and the gas, that kind of stuff, started working on what was there, and we do now have a leak at the tank. Initially it started at the stem on the valve. There's actually a screw type valve underneath the tank on this truck. Normally we kept that off. When we turned it on, we noticed the stem started leaking. That wasn't a big deal, that's a serviceable valve. But then we noticed with some more sitting, they called back like, hey, truck's still leaking with the valve closed, and the valve, or actually the threads, or something in the area above the valve started leaking. More than likely with the gas sitting in the tank again after all these years. The solvent started working, there was some gunk and other things. You actually could see the flow of the buildup running over the valve as the gasoline started dissolving some of the stuff with the solvent stuff inside. So we're going to try to get the valve out today. We were here a few days ago, and the tank was draining very slowly. Literally took several hours to get most of the gas drained out of the tank. We're going to make sure we have that out. Try to get the valve out, see if we can service it, see what's going on, hopefully get the valve back in, things sealed up, and have the truck back where it's lot drivable. We're taking the line off here because it does have a small piece of flexible hose here, and the valve is off. So my hope and intent is to separate here and be able to bring this down and drain what fuel is left in the tank back into a portable fuel tank. Yeah, lots of dust coming out of there. So the inside of the tank looked pretty clean when we had the top out and the sending unit out inside, but obviously with fuel going in, solvents going in, things building up, the tank just looked clean and dry, but storage did what storage does and made a mess of a few things. So, but we'll clean it up and fix it. And that's not much of a stream, so maybe fortunately for repairs, but unfortunately due to fuel spent, much of it may have already leaked out and evaporated off, and I'm sure a lot has based on the buildup on the valve. All right, we're under the truck and I can't really see what's filling, but we'll try from under here. If you just saw, we've got the valve off, and the other day we cleaned a lot of the gunk off, but you can see, hopefully see the buildup here. That was not there when we started working on the truck. That all came down through here and around where the tank feed comes through the floor pan. The tank is in the cab on this truck, so at least for now. But once it started leaking, this valve that was fairly clean. You can see all the buildup here on the back side that I didn't clean off, but it was flowing all over. And I can't tell from here if it was seeping around the threads between the valve and the tank line, or if it was leaking further up somewhere near the tank. So we'll be investigating further, trying to figure out exactly where our leak was from, what was going on, and what we have to do to fix it. The lower cushion's not a big deal, just pick up, pop out. It's just got spring-loaded clips holding it in. There's normally a few bolts holding the rest of the seat in. We had this out before. We just stuck it back in to be able to drive the truck. Didn't bolt it back in, so should be able to wiggle this thing back out fairly easily, get it out of the way, and get access back to the tank. I will see if I can get this thing out of the other side so you can see a little better, but just a few studs that we didn't put back in. Should come out fairly easily. As you can see, once the bolts are out, not a big deal getting the seat out. I'll show you the tank up close, but much easier job if trucks aren't parked on the other side. But I'm not sure if I ever showed it. On these trucks, the old manual shift, if you're wondering what the extra levers are, or even what the levers at all are, this is the pump shift for the transfer case. Let you drive down the road and engage the pump. Obviously, the 4-speed manual transmission. This is the parking brake lever. So, not familiar with these older trucks, that's what that is. Specifically to the fire trucks, that's the transfer case that instead of putting it in 4-wheel drive, engages the pump. And I will do my best here to try to get you inside with the camera and the light so you can see, but there it is, the fuel tank right inside. Like I said, the last time we were in here and had the seat out, we had the fuel sending unit up here out. Looking down in the tank, didn't see much. It was light surface rust, but dry based on how much stuff started leaking and built up in the tank, though. Pretty obvious that it was stored with fuel in it, and all that gunk broke loose and turned into a gummy substance that started leaking out once we put fresh fuel back in it. But you can see there's the neck, there's the connections where the seat used to be. We're going to break these band straps, not break them, but loosen those up, take the bands off, and work on getting this tank out so we can get a closer look at underneath, see exactly where our leak is coming from, because it looks to be, we knew it was above the valve, but it doesn't appear to be the threads of the valve. It looks to be more through the floor pan and near the tank itself. Watch the previous videos, you've already seen this, but this is the fuel level sending unit. Just a brass float that we've already shown. Has plenty of corrosion of its own, but it just moves up and down and floats in the fuel and sends a signal to your gauge. We have not diagnosed that, whether it's working or not, since the float doesn't float. We've never actually checked to see if the gauge reads when it moves. All right, so our sending unit is out. Our bands are off. So these tubes here, fill tube, vent tube. Gotta get these disconnected. Try to break this connection. Should be able to get the tank out of here. Gonna be a little stuck. So let's get some persuasive devices on here. I can't say that I would recommend the channel locks for grabbing these, but since I know this is a temporary deal and we're going to move the tank eventually anyway, I don't care to manipulate the hoses a little bit with these just so I can get it out and service it for now. Now, if all this rubber was supple and new and easily formed, I could easily pop this gasket out here and take this whole hose assembly out. But original 1949 gasket here, it's much more rock than rubber now, and I don't want to tear it up just yet, so I'm still going to work on trying to get this to break loose from the hose itself, so I can leave this hanging for now. If you're wondering why I don't just slide it away, there's actually the fuel supply line at the bottom of the tank goes through the cab floor, so I don't really have much play side to side. If I can get it out and to clear, which it now has, probably can get away from it over there. We are basically out. Clear. So tank is out, and you can see we had a dribble spill there inside the cab. We'll get that up, but if you're wondering what accumulates under a gas tank when it's in a truck since 1949, it's that kind of stuff. Clearly, even though this was stored inside, it did spend a few years in a barn. The varmints did a little nesting. They brought in some treats, left it behind, so we'll have to clear all that out. We'll get the gas picked up, but you can see, other than a little surface rust of patina, things look great in the cab. No rust on this thing. We'll clean that up, and that's going to be usable space for us eventually. Once we switch to the frame-mounted tank, fuel tank, that space we can use. This truck was bare bones, nothing in it, so you never know. Maybe some nice cruising speakers going in. It'll allow us to put the seat back a little further maybe. We may see if we can gain a little room. I'm 6 foot tall. It's a little cramped driving this at 6 foot. So, you know, if we can work something out where the seat goes a little further back or change out seats to look retro but sit further back, that may be part of the future plan also, eventually, but not anytime soon. The good news is the tank is out and no rust. Everything looks good. So it didn't look like it from underneath, from the valve coming out, but nothing there. The feed looks good. The nipple's good. Threads are good, more than likely. That was simply just probably could have taken and put another turn on the valve and fixed that leak. It must have been leaking somewhere, just seeping around the threads. Not a big deal. Easily fixed, so we know the valve itself was leaking. We'll see if we can either get a service kit, get the valve replaced, get one back on it. We'll put this tank back in for now just to keep this thing driving here on the lot to the changeover. But that's good news. Nothing crazy there. We're good to go. I can tell what the gunk was now.
What is it?
The rubber gasket grommet.
Okay.
that was in the floor pan. When it started leaking the gas, it's dissolved it, and it's just soft and gummy. So it's the.
That makes sense.
Yep. Those threads were weeping enough. It dissolved that, so all the rubber that was there is. It's soft and supple again, but it's just kind of sticky now.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is fine. That means a little thread sealant and put it back up. I think we'll be okay. So. So, what we're doing with the tape right now, obviously, keep the straps up out of the way to go in easier, but I'm going to make some temporary pads just to avoid chafing between the tank and the mounts for now until we do the relocation. But this will avoid the metal-to-metal contact, hopefully. We'll look underneath and make sure our feed line went through properly. It looks to be in the right position, so we should be good. All right, we look good underneath, so we can take our new components, cut our line, and reinstall the new temporary fuel lines to get Fire 49 up and running again. All right, well, we've made our parts store run, got back, picked a few things up here. Obviously, this is what we took off of the truck. We've taken the tank out, inspected the tank, and actually the tank itself was fine. It wasn't leaking. We were getting fuel seepage around the threads here, so that was part of the leak, and all the gunk that had appeared that we weren't sure exactly what it was once the tank was out became apparent. What it was, the small fuel leak here, the vapors and the leak, the rubber gasket and grommet that were around where the fuel line went through the cab floor under the truck, either just due to age or it never was a solvent safe rubber, but that rubber deteriorated, melted down, kind of caked all this up. So it looks like the tank was still pretty clean. We didn't get a bunch of gunk out of the tank. It was just the rubber grommet disintegrating. Obviously, no big surprise why this was leaking. When we first got 49 running originally, we did note that here around the stem on this valve, when you would open it, we were getting some leakage around the stem, very, very small, wasn't much, not that big a deal. But now that we've had it driving, been running a while, and it started sitting with gas in it, we started leaking around the threads here. As mentioned, that melted the grommet, but also this line that just fell apart starts weeping. So you can see old construction. This was a crimp fit. The hose went over that. That was in there, and there actually used to be more of an outer sheathing. There's a little bit left here. This line was crimped on, and then it fit the hard line on the frame rail. Well, this obviously has just fallen apart. It was not serviceable. We're going to replace it. We're working on Sunday, which makes things harder because the places that can supply anything tend to not be open on Sundays, at least here locally. So we went to the local box store auto parts place and just picked up this barbed nipple with the same 5/16 thread. We're going to replace that with this so we can put the 3/8 inside diameter fuel line, new fuel line, or actually fuel hose on here. We'll clamp this. This will go back on the tank, and what we're going to do is, since we're going to be moving the tank eventually anyway, we're just going to cut the hard line at the frame rail, and for now slide this over enough that we can lot drive it. But eventually, once we have the tank relocated, we'll leave it without a flare or anything, so we can apply a union to it, and we'll run further hard line with a few hoses to the tank once it's relocated. But for now, to get us around here driving, lot driving and stuff, we'll do this. We'll slide it over. It's not a pressure system. It's just gravity fed. So this over the 3/8 line with some hose clamps will be just fine. We are going to work on this a little bit. If you take these, this is a serviceable valve, so you can actually take it apart. If you take the cap off there, the stem will come out with it. The body's basic. It's got some flare joints, threads inside. So the feed from the fuel tank comes here. This is the outlet clean out plug. Take the cap off, and it's just got a simple gasket there, and gasket there. That's what actually plugs off on this side. When that's screwed in and you screw it in, it closes up against the back side of that. That shuts the fuel off to the fuel line from the tank. This little gasket here seals around the stem and up in here. So what we're going to do is, all you have to do is put it back in, and we're going to put a little extra pressure on that one there to put some on the collar to see if we can't get the old original seals to seal up. Like I said, we're just trying to get through temporarily for now until we change out the tank. But hopefully that seals it up, stops the weeping, so this thing can sit here in the shop for now without dripping gas constantly. And we don't lose the gas. We also don't drip it in the shop, the fire hazard, all the things associated with it. But we'll work on tightening this up. We'll tighten this down to try and stop the stem leak, which it wasn't leaking when closed anyway, so that'll be okay for now. We'll get some thread sealant back on all the thread locations. We're going to add the barbed nipple here, new line, cut the hard line, and then if all goes well, we should be able to turn the fuel back on without it all dumping on the ground, making a mess and keeping us from driving the truck. So, all right, we are back under Fiery 49 right here. That's the line off of the fuel tank back through where we had the gunk earlier, like we mentioned. Rubber gasket, or a grommet, was there. It has deteriorated due to the fuel leak. We're going to address the fuel leak. Not putting a grommet in right back now because we're going to relocate the fuel tank anyway. So not too worried about it. It'll get us around here lot driving. We're going to cut this line, the hard line, right here, and just put the valve back in and put rubber hose, fuel hose back on. This is 3/8 line. It's 3/8 inside diameter hose. We'll slide it over with the screw clamp. That'll work because this is a gravity feed system. It's not like a modern car with the fuel pump in the tank pushing pressure. Just gravity feeds in here. So we're going to start with some of our thread sealant to ensure we don't seep again when we reassemble. So while we had the tank out, we did wipe this down, took a brass brush, kind of cleaned the threads and wiped it down. I've already assembled the valve and the hose. I'm hoping it goes back on and allows me to turn like it did previously with the older piece. That should be good. And we can. All right, so we've got that off. You can see here, just 3/8 line. Normally, if I had the tubing cutter, we would have cut the tubing cutter. We'd deburr, run that through. I don't have any of that with me, but just to get this thing going so they can move it here around the shop. I'm going to get this on here. Got plenty of length. A marker cut. Also not the way I would like to cut the hose, but I'm under here, it's in my pocket, we're going to go with it. Just because it's getting late, I need to get home. Good fit there. We've already applied our clamp. We did that outside the truck over on the bench to make things a little easier. Don't have to crank on that. That should be good. We'll put fuel in it a little bit, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully no leaks. I'll go ahead and open the valve so when I do start putting fuel in shortly, I can listen for it and close if needed, but hopefully no issues. All right, we have the tank and the cab fully secured, all the hoses back on, everything's locked down. We've got our repairs and replacement, and hopefully leak stoppage has occurred here under the truck. About to put the fuel back in, so let's put some in. Slowly at first, we'll add about a gallon so we can control it if something is wrong, but we'll put some fuel in, get a little bit, and if that doesn't leak, we'll add more and more. And then if things go well, we'll try fire up and see if 49 is ready to run again with no fuel leaks. Stand by. All right, a little over a gallon in now. That should have been enough to get fuel definitely covering the outlet from the tank there. So still looks dry, no drips. Looking good so far. All right, 3 gallons in. We're still dry, looking good. I don't see anything seeping, weeping, dripping. Spilled more trying to get fuel back in it than what's showing down here, so that's a good thing. So hopefully the need for the absorbent mat below the valve here has now been remedied and gone away. All right, looks like we've got the fuel leaking addressed. Everything looks good, it's dry, nothing's weeping, leaping, dripping, anything. We look good, so we put fuel back in the tank's back in, the seat's not back in, but we're gonna go ahead and try and start the truck up just to make sure everything's working right. We'll run it a little bit just because it hasn't been ran in several weeks because of the leak, where we've taken the fuel out of it. But obviously this is a 49. As I mentioned, it's a gravity feed fuel system. The fuel pump is actually mechanically driven up on the engine. So if you're not familiar, your modern cars, when you put the key in or hit the start button, the electric fuel pump kicks on and pressurizes the system and kicks all the air out. But this is a mechanical system. Until the engine starts turning, nothing is actually pumping any fuel. So we've been letting it gravity feed from the tank, hopefully up to the fuel pump. But it's probably going to take a little bit of cranking to get the truck to actually start, because all the air that's in the line from where we cut the line, the tank was dry, the carburetor fuel bowl is going to be dry from not being ran for a while. So it's not that there's anything wrong with the truck if it takes a while to crank, but the fuel pump that's running off the engine has to have time to get some engine revolutions to mechanically lift the fuel up, fill the carburetor bowl back up. Then the truck should start. So let's see what happens. So all that cranking, the truck is going to fire up, the choke was out, I had the throttle pulled, but it took that much time just for fuel to get picked up by the fuel pump, pressurized back in the system from the fuel pump up to the carburetor, and put some fuel in the carburetor. So now that it's fired, I'll get the choke adjustments and stuff set right, and we should fire up and run. All right, success. We can drive again. We have no fuel leaks. The truck's still running good. Hopefully nothing else to address that becomes a new problem. We can get back to dealing with the old things like the wiring. We still have the brakes and all that stuff. But successful repair. We'll get the seat back into it. And hopefully we'll find a nice day to take a ride soon.